Hello, my name is Peter, this is Run for Fun, and today I'll be giving you my top tips for new runners. As someone who is still fairly new to running and hasn't been running for that long, I feel like I can remember what it's like to be a newer runner. My first tip today will be about finding and remembering your motivation. Whether you're running for overall health, or you're running for mental health, or you are more trying to improve as a runner and you're focused more on the stat kind of stuff, it helps to figure out what's important for you when you're running. You need to find your why, because that will help motivate you to run even when you don't feel like it. So every time you have this lack of motivation for a run, you need to remember your why or your whys if you have like several things that motivate you to run. For me, it can, for example, be hard to go on a run after work when it's cold and it's dark and I just don't feel like going for it. But then I try to remember, why am I running? Like, what's my overall motivation? And then I get it done, because I know, okay, I want to improve as a runner, so I have to get out on the day, even the days where it's not that easy and it's hard to get out. And also I know that I usually feel good after my runs, so I just have to get going. And yeah. My second tip is to set specific goals, whether that's, for example, to run 2 times a week, finish a 10k or finish a marathon, or whether it's more time specific goals like I want to run a 5k in less than 25 minutes. Then these specific goals will help motivating you and keep you going. And these can both be short-term and long-term goals. For example, I have a short-term goal to run a half marathon in under 1 hour and 25 minutes, and I have a long-term goal of running a 10k in less than 35 minutes. Having these goals help motivating me, and it's also fun when you look back, like you can see, okay, I achieved that goal and I achieved that goal, but now I have this new goal, and you can like get a feeling of progress in your running. My third tip of the day will be about gut issues. Gut issues is something you may have heard about if you're like part of the running community and browsing around. People, for example, mention runner's trot, which is basically like runner's diarrhea, and it is something that quite a lot of people suffer with, getting like stomach cramps and such while they run. But I still think it's a little bit overlooked, and also the ways that you combat this is overlooked in my opinion. Personally, I used to not like running that much, because in my youth, like I would play football and such, and I often got cramps in my stomach while running, both when playing football and when trying to race. And I knew some advice for this, which was like, don't eat just before you run. You should probably leave like 2 or 3 hours. And also the other advice I heard was that you should always go to the toilet before running. But this wasn't enough for me. So what did I do? Well, the tip that made me progress with this issue was to limit the intake of fiber, protein and fat before running. The issue is that fiber, protein and fat all take a long time to digest for your digestive system. An example of how I have used this knowledge about fiber, protein and fat is that I used to eat oatmeal with almonds for my breakfast, but now instead I have chosen to eat them after I run, because almonds are high in both, like in all 3 things. And another thing that I do is that in the weekend I usually just eat maybe cornflakes, or sometimes even just a little bit of fruit before I run, because then I don't have all that fiber, protein and fat in my digestive system. And these also have carbs that are important for running. And something that's key for me to say is that you shouldn't cut out fiber, protein and fat from your diet, because all these things are very healthy and you need them in your diet. But you should be thinking about when you intake them if you suffer from these gut issues. So you can think about when to eat things and like how you can move things around to make it easier for you when you're running. And I can say it certainly has made a world of difference for me. My next tip will be about improving as a runner. So basically, to improve as a runner, you need first of all to do running or some kind of exercise, and you need to recover. So that sounds simple enough, I think. But of course it's a little bit more complex than this. But basically when you exercise, you break down your muscle fibers, and then it basically tells your body to make them stronger the next time. And it's when you're recovering that you actually get stronger, because that's when your body will have time to make these muscle fibers strong. This means that you need to be focusing on recovering properly, because that's when you'll make your improvements. And the two most important factors for recovery are sleep and fueling, which is eating and drinking. There are many other things you can do which are like extra. You may have seen some commercials for recovery boots, and maybe you've seen some stretching and there's foam rolling. But all these things are like extra things, and I would even recommend against them as a newer runner, especially like recovery boots and foam rollers and such, because it's an investment you don't need to make yet. Maybe later you'll find that that's fine, but you don't need to go out spending all this money at first. Because recovery, you just need to really dial in on getting as much sleep as you can as possible, and also with fueling you want to get in enough carbohydrates, because that will give your body the best chance to recover. Another thing that's very important if you want to improve is to be consistent. It's better to run 4 times a week the whole year than it is to run like 6 times a week for like 35 weeks, because then you'll have too many break weeks and it just won't lead to the same kind of improvements. Obviously sometimes life can play a factor, and maybe you have more time in some periods than others, and then it might be necessary to cut a little bit down. But if you can, then try to keep your running as consistent as possible if you want to improve. So now we're here, and my next tip will be about progression and injuries. So if you've been around the running community, you may have heard about the 10% rule, and if not, I will explain to you. Basically the 10% rule means that you shouldn't increase the distance of your running by more than 10% per week. This is a very good rule to make sure that you don't go overboard and suddenly increase too much, which will lead to overtraining and also could lead to injuries. So following this rule does give you a good guideline, but it's of course also a little bit unnuanced. For example, there's a big difference between increasing 10% if you're running 5 kilometers a week, and if you're running 120 kilometers a week. So that would be, if you're running 5 kilometers a week, you could only increase up to 5.5 kilometers, which is probably a bit too conservative, and you can probably go a little bit harder than that. So you just have to have some common sense about it. Don't increase too much, but you don't have to exactly follow this rule. My next tip is very related to the one before, and it's about the intensity you're running at. A big part of the reason why people get injured is that too many people run too fast on most of their runs. You may have heard of the 80-20 rule, which means that you should run 80% of your running time easy and 20% medium or harder. And this is a good overall rule to adhere to, since it emphasizes that you can't run hard all the time if you want to stay injury free, but the distribution doesn't have to be exactly 80-20. It's more important that it's a good balance between easy running and harder running. For example, there's a big difference for someone who runs 7 times a week versus 2 times a week. If you run 2 times a week, you can likely get away with more of your time spent in the higher intensity zone, since your body will have more days to recover. I would always recommend, no matter what, to do a warm-up and cool down, which can just be walking for 5 minutes, or if you're more experienced, it could be jogging for 5 to 10 minutes at a pace that's slow for you. And this helps you with getting your blood flowing and you'll be ready to perform. And after your run, it helps your body to gradually go from being pushed to returning to normal and gradually getting your heart rate down. So my next tip will then be what is easy, because this tip before may have left you wondering like, okay, I have to run easy, but what is easy for me? And this is something that's not like one answer to, but you can try to find your easy pace in different ways. One recommendation is it should be a pace where you can have a casual conversation at, so you should be able to talk pretty casually without like having too much trouble with breathing while you're talking. If you want to go a little bit more scientific, you can say that it's 70% of your max heart rate is around your easy pace. So for me, for example, I have measured my max heart rate to be 195. So my easy pace below 70% is like 137. So that's kind of where I aim to be on my easy runs. Like I can go above, but it just has to be on average, not much higher. Then I know that I'm around that easy pace. If you don't know your max heart rate, obviously you can't calculate this, but you can test it by doing some all-out tests. Maybe you can. There are some other videos which can better show you how to do this than this one. Also use some online calculators, which, like, if you input one of your recent race results, it will give you an estimation of your easy pace, what it could be around. I'll put one link to one of these calculators in the description, but I'll just let you know, it doesn't, like, for me, I think they usually estimate a little bit high compared to what I run when I run my easy runs, but it at least gives you some idea of what your easy pace could be like. My last tip will be about finding basically what works for you, because we are all individuals and we all have our strengths with like our bodies and our genetics and whatnot that make a difference, and also with our lives, we have different lives. Some people have families and so on. So we need to find what works for us individually. For example, I have not found that stretching really helps me. Like, I don't feel any effect when I stretch compared to when I do not. And since I haven't found that, it's not something I want to use my time on. And also strength training is not something I do as much as I probably should, because like if you see the science about it, like studies, it shows that it's very helpful, and both for strength and for injury prevention. But for me, it's just a small part that I do whenever I feel like it, basically. But for someone that struggles with injuries, that could be very different. Maybe they need to use that time strength training. Basically, there are a lot of ways you can improve your running, but it needs to be something you can also stick to in the long run and that you find fun. Because if you go out and do like strength training 3 times a week, but you find it absolutely miserable, then it's probably not going to be something you stick with for the long term. And same if you want to improve, but you absolutely hate running 7 times a week, then probably it's not something you should do, because you're not going to do it in the long term. And this can also be because you have family or whatnot, so you don't have the time for all these things. So it's basically just you should find something that's sustainable for you in the long run. This was Peter, Run for Fun. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. There'll be more videos to come. Run fast, run far, but always run for fun. See you!